Warm greetings, fellow book devourers. Get ready to feast your mind on an irresistible tale that will leave you hungry for more blindness by José Saramago. If my videos bring a smile to your face or provide valuable insights, show some love by liking and following my channel. And if you want to take it a step further, leave a comment sharing your favorite part or any suggestions you may have. Chapter 1. A man, known as the first man, stops his car at a red light. When the light turns green, the first man does not accelerate but stays in his car gesticulating. A traffic disturbance ensues and other motorists and pedestrians approach the first man, who announces he has suddenly gone blind. A brief scene of confusion ensues until another man, known as the thief, approaches and volunteers to take the first man home. The thief drives the first man home and accompanies him inside the apartment building as far as the first man's apartment door. The thief offers to sit with the first man, but the first man, suddenly suspicious, declines the offer. The thief opens the first man's apartment door and then, retaining the first man's keys, leaves. The first man enters the apartment and tries to orient himself. He accidentally knocks over a vase that shatters on the floor. He instinctively tries to clean up the glass fragments, but quickly cuts open his hand. He crudely bandages the wound, locates a couch, and sits down to wait for his wife to return home. When the first man's wife arrives, she is angry to see the broken vase on the floor. As she cleans, she notices blood and becomes concerned. She seeks out her husband, who informs her he is blind. She thinks he is joking, but he assures her he is blind. She quickly tends to his wound, then telephones an ophthalmologist and schedules an emergency appointment. Then she guides her husband to the street, and they search for his car until they eventually realize it has been stolen. The man immediately suspects the thief has stolen the automobile. The first man and his wife make their way to the doctor's office. The doctor, known as the doctor, sees him immediately before his other patients who are already waiting. One of the other patients, a prostitute, wears dark glasses. Another patient wears a black eye patch over one eye. Some of the waiting patients complain about the doctor seeing the first man before them, but the patient with an eye patch defends the first man, claiming that as the remaining patients are not blind, the first man should receive preferential treatment. After a thorough examination, the doctor announces that the first man's eyes are physically perfect. There is nothing wrong. Chapter 2. The thief leaves the first man's apartment and steals the first man's automobile. The thief begins a long drive to the garage where the stolen automobile will be processed. The thief becomes nervous and agitated, and he concentrates on his driving in an attempt to avoid suspicious behavior. After some time, the thief is so nervous, he pulls the car to the side of the road and gets out for a brief respite. As he stands on the side of the road near the stolen automobile, the thief suddenly goes blind. Elsewhere, the doctor treats his remaining patients as he considers the first man's inexplicable blindness. That evening, the doctor goes home and spends some time consulting the medical literature about blindness, but is not able to discover anything similar. The doctor speaks with his wife, known only as the doctor's wife, about the first man's blindness. Then the couple goes to bed, and the doctor's wife quickly falls asleep, while the doctor suddenly realizes he has gone blind. Elsewhere, a young woman who earlier in the day had visited the doctor's office for treatment of conjunctivitis goes to a hotel and meets a man in the lounge. Next, the young woman, a prostitute, identified as the girl with dark glasses, accompanies the man to a hotel room where they have sex. In the throes of passion, the girl with dark glasses realizes that she can only see a milky whiteness, and she briefly assumes the visual defect to be caused by her sexual ecstasy. Chapter 3. A policeman escorts the thief to his home, never realizing the man is a car thief. The thief's wife immediately assumes the thief has been apprehended for some criminal behavior and is nearly relieved when she is informed that her husband has gone blind. Elsewhere, the girl with dark glasses realizes she has gone blind and begins to scream. The man she has just had sex with quickly dresses and flees the disturbance. The hotel staff wishes to avoid further complications and ejects the girl with dark glasses, still improperly dressed, onto the street where a policeman hails a taxi for her. The taxi takes her to her parents' home. The doctor, meanwhile, tries to sleep but is unable to due to worrying over his own recent blindness. He does not disturb his wife but stays beside her throughout the night and considers his own situation. When she awakens in the morning, he tells her he is blind, and they discuss the possible ramifications. The doctor comes to the realization that some type of infectious agent has possibly caused his blindness, and he angrily denounces himself for potentially infecting his wife with the disease. The doctor then places a telephone call to the Ministry of Health and tries to report a potentially new epidemic. He is ignored by a board functionary who refuses to take his report seriously. The doctor then calls the hospital association with which he is involved and reports the information to a colleague. Several hours later, the Ministry of Health contacts the doctor for further information and then informs him that they will send a medical team to pick him up for transportation to a medical facility. The doctor also learns that the Ministry of Health intends to take his medical files into their possession. The doctor's wife packs his bag and also packs her own bag. When the medical team arrives, they tell the doctor's wife that she may not accompany her husband because they are taking him into quarantine. The doctor's wife immediately announces that she, too, has suddenly gone blind and is therefore allowed to accompany her husband into the ambulance. Chapter 4. The Minister of Health and other government officials meet to discuss the public response to what is widely assumed to be an epidemic of a newly emerging infectious disease. The officials are callous and sinister and eventually decide to use an abandoned mental hospital facility to quarantine by force all those suffering from blindness, as well as all those who have been potentially exposed to this presumed disease. The Minister of Health determines that, to save money, the patients will be largely responsible for policing themselves and no actual medical assistance will be rendered during quarantine. The quarantine will last as long as necessary. Perhaps the patients will be quarantined for the remainder of their lifespan. The doctor and the doctor's wife are driven to the mental hospital and told to proceed inside. They are not escorted or assisted in any way. The doctor quickly surmises that his wife is not in fact blind, but has lied in order to accompany him. The doctor's wife tells him this is indeed the case, but implores him not to send her away, as she presumes that at any moment she too will become blind. A few minutes later, 4 other blind people arrive. The first man, the thief, the girl in dark glasses, and a young boy called the boy with the squint. The girl in dark glasses tries to comfort the boy with the squint, who is crying about leaving his mother. After a brief discussion, the doctor discovers the first man, the girl with dark glasses, and the boy with the squint had all been his patients. During this time, the doctor's wife pretends also to be blind. The several characters locate themselves in a large dormitory-style room and take beds. An announcement comes over the public address system. The announcement consists of 15 separate concepts. In essence, the patients are told that they must remain completely isolated, and any who attempt to leave the hospital will be killed. No assistance of any kind will be offered to the patients. If the hospital catches fire, it will be allowed to burn. Patients who die must be buried by the survivors, etc. The patients must police themselves and organize themselves as they see fit. Supplies and food will be delivered once each day and must be distributed as the patients decide. There will be no communication with the outside world. The quarantine will last for an indefinite period. The doctor is initially proposed as a potential leader, but the thief objects, saying that they are all equal. The first man eventually ascertains the identity of the thief and accuses him of stealing the automobile. The thief, in turn, accuses the first man of stealing his vision, and a physical fight erupts, which lasts for several minutes. The boy with the squint announces he must use the restroom. The doctor's wife claims to be familiar with the layout of the facility because of previous exploration, and the people join hands behind her so she can lead them to the restroom. During the trip, the thief begins forcibly to fondle the girl with dark glasses' breast and neck, and she lashes out and kicks him in the leg, her spike high heel plunging deep into his thigh. The doctor's wife realizes the wound is very serious because it is bleeding profusely. The doctor's wife leads the doctor and the thief away to a supply room where she bandages the wound and staunches the bleeding. She then leads the entire group to a restroom. The boy with the squint has already urinated in his pants but does not tell anyone. The remaining characters use the restroom and then return to their beds. Chapter 5. In the early morning of the next day, the doctor's wife wakes up and considers the situation. She realizes that no assistance will be forthcoming and considers the thief's attitude of complete freedom. She feels that the blind are like dogs without names. They identify themselves only by smell. The thief groans and she moves to him and inspects his wound. In just a few hours, it has turned black and his bed is soaked in blood, his head feverish. The doctor's wife dreads becoming blind and wonders when it will happen. 5 more blind inmates arrive and fumble for beds. They had previously been in the other wing of the hospital but had been evicted upon losing their sight. One of the new blind inmates announces herself as number 5, and it is discovered that she is the first man's wife. The thief continues to groan. The girl with dark glasses apologizes to the thief, and he in turn apologizes to her. The public address system crackles to life and announces the first food delivery. The doctor and his wife go to the front gate to pick up the food. They shout at the armed guards requesting medicines, but their requests are refused, and they threaten with being shot if they do not return to the building. The food is insufficient but eagerly consumed. Then many more inmates arrive from the outside world. The public address system makes the evening announcement of the rules. The announcement is received with confusion, complaints, and fear. In the evening, the doctor's wife again checks on the thief and finds his condition worsened. The thief tells her he knows she can see, but she denies the ability. Later that night, when everyone else is asleep, the thief sneaks out of the ward and crawls painfully to the gates. The thief intends to call to the guards and demand medical assistance, but upon seeing his pale, ghostly face, the young guard raises his rifle and shoots him in the head. Chapter 6. The thief is buried in a shallow grave in the yard. A group of internees waits around the front of the hospital for the next food delivery. When it arrives, the soldiers are nervous, and as the crowd of blind people surges forward, several soldiers open fire and begin to shoot down blind people. In all, 9 internees are killed. The other internees haul away the food and the bodies of the dead and, after eating, bury them. The doctor's wife attracts some attention by her ability to perform complex tasks. Although the girl with dark glasses will never realize it, One of the dead men is the man who she met at the hotel for sex, the man who had abandoned her when she went blind. That evening, the public address system makes the routine announcement of the rules. It is received with fear and numerous arguments start. The latrines grow filthy and all of the toilet paper is used up. Some of the blind people begin to have sex with each other. Chapter 7. In the evening, the doctor's wife realizes she has forgotten to wind her watch. The other inmates have long ago stopped winding theirs. The doctor and his wife have sex quietly. In the morning, the girl with dark glasses loudly blames herself for the death of the thief. A blind man wryly recalls the idiom that in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. The morning food delivery is received and numerous people steal food and hide in corners to eat more than their share. Outside, the soldiers threaten to shoot any blind people that approach the gates too closely. As the soldiers watch the blind trying to locate food, they compare them to pigs and refer to them as idiots. On the other hand, the blind people feel that the soldiers are doing a good and responsible job given the dire circumstances. In the afternoon, 200 more blind inmates arrive and are herded into the hospital, which is now filled beyond capacity. The blind people arrive in vans, and the soldiers insist that the drivers are now potentially contaminated and force them inside the compound. One driver refuses and is summarily executed. Widespread fighting and bickering accompany the huge influx of new people. Chapter 8. One of the new blind people to arrive is the man with the black eye, Patch. He has brought with him a small handheld radio that operates on batteries. By chance, he ends up in the same ward of the hospital as the doctor's wife, and the other principal characters of the novel. This ward retains some semblance of cleanliness and order, while the other 5 wards become progressively more filthy and disorganized. The various characters sit around the radio and listen to music and news. When the doctor's wife hears the time announced, she whines and sets her watch. The news also announces that a new government is being formed. The man with the black eye patch then recounts his experiences of the past several days, noting that hundreds of cases of blindness have arisen every day. Social chaos has erupted. Bus, automobile, and airplane crashes have occurred with alarming frequency as the vehicle operators are suddenly blinded. Blind people roam the streets begging for help. Many of the internees conclude they are better off being imprisoned than abandoned. They begin to talk, and they tell their various blind stories, noting the last image seen. One person, described only as an unknown voice, was visiting an art museum and describes several of the paintings that are considered by the other people. Chapter 9. The halls, rooms, and grounds of the mental hospital become festooned with feces and other filth. The doctor's wife agonizes over her unique status. She first decides to tell the others that she can see, and then decides she will not tell them. Several days pass by, and then one group of people forms a sort of gang and dominates the food. When the food arrives, these people, all men and 20 in number, use cudgels and violence to keep the others away from the food. In addition, the leader of the thugs has a handgun and threatens to murder anyone who opposes him. The thugs take all of the food back to their ward and hoard it. After a few hours, they announce that anyone wanting food must buy it. The thugs demand all valuables. After much serious contention and argument, the other inmates collect all of their valuables and surrender them to the thugs, who carefully catalog the good. The doctor takes a bag of watches, rings, and other items to the thugs and notes that one of the thugs is a so-called legitimate blind man. A man blind from birth, not blind from birth, not blind from the white sickness. This blind man, called the chronicler, uses an anaglyptography machine with which he records Braille records. Chapter 10. The man with the black eye patch withheld his radio from payment to the thugs. He decides, however, to keep the radio as secret as possible, so he therefore listens to it only on low volume and in secret. He then spreads the news he gleans by word of mouth, and as the news is relayed from person to person to person, it becomes distorted or exaggerated. One day, the news announcer stops mid-sentence and announces he too has gone blind. The station then goes off the air and another station cannot be found. The doctor's wife considers a pair of scissors that she has in her possession. They are long, are very sharp, and she seems fascinated with their keen edge and sharp points. She hides the scissors by hanging them on a nail high on the wall in plain sight. One way, she sneaks through the mental hospital and spies on the thugs. In the hallway, she walks by people having sex amidst the excrement and filth of the floors. She counts 20 thugs barricaded behind stacked beds and notes. They have a huge stockpile of food. She thinks how loud a gunshot is and thinks about how quiet being stabbed by scissors would be. She watches one man sit down and relax and focuses on the bulging veins in his neck. She returns to her own ward and bed and wishes that she was also blind so that she would not have to see the horror of the filthy conditions, see the starving and filthy people, and watch others having sex in piles of filth. Chapter 11. The naturally blind man, the chronicler, considers what he should write in Braille. He thinks of all of the outrages that have been perpetrated upon the people in the hospital by the soldiers at first and lately by the thugs. He wanders through the hospital and overhears the complaints of the many inmates. He knows that influenza is rampaging through them and knows that they lie in filth and excrement. He knows they are starving and without further funds with which to purchase food. He knows that much of the food hoarded by the thugs has spoiled, but rather than distribute it, they let it go to waste. He knows that the hospital now contains over 300 inmates and that some of them have cancer or other life-threatening conditions that ordinarily would receive medical attention. Here, however, there is no medical attention to be had. He knows that the thugs are planning a monstrous departure from humanity and briefly considers separating himself from them. In the end, however, he returns to their safety and their food without writing down anything. The thugs then announce that the initial payments have been expended and additional money must be surrendered for future food. There is complaining and ineffectual demands and protests, but in the end, the inmates gather a tiny amount of remaining money and valuable items and hand it over to the thugs. Several more days go by, and the thugs then announce that the second payment has been expended. Since there is no more money, the thugs, all men, now demand women to service their sexual desires. Inflamed arguments erupt throughout the various wards and continue for several days while the blind people go without food. In the end, the wards decide to send all of their women, one ward's women, every few days in exchange for food. As the normal boundary of human behavior begins to dissolve, the blind people become more bestial. Eventually, they all begin to have sex with whomever they please. The girl with dark glasses generally withholds herself, however, and usually only engages in sex with the man with the black eye patch. One evening, the doctor's wife watches in fascinated horror as her husband quietly sneaks from his bed, walks to the bed of the girl with dark glasses who receives him, and copulates with her. His wife walks to the bedside and watches them have sex. When her husband tries to sneak back to his bed, she puts her hands on him and the girl with dark glasses and comforts them, lightly kissing each of them. The two women share a brief and intimate conversation, and the doctor's wife then confides to the girl with dark glasses that she can, in fact, see. Soon, the thugs demand their sexual partners from the ward where the principal characters live. The ward, by ward rotation, has devolved to them. The women place their hands on others' shoulders and are escorted to the thugs' ward. The leader of the thugs walks along the line, fondling the women, feeling their bodies, and loudly commenting upon their physical attributes. He takes the girl with dark glasses and the doctor's wife for himself, pronouncing them to be especially attractive. The other 5 women are then drawn away by the remaining 19 thugs, and a brutal series of gang rapes ensues. After the leader rapes the girl with dark glasses, he hands her over to the other thugs who descend upon her and gang rape her. The leader then forces the doctor's wife to perform oral sex, and then she too is gang raped throughout the night. Several hours later, the thugs taunt and belittle the women, having already raped them, sexually assaulted them in every conceivable way, and physically beaten them. They then dismiss the women, who stagger back to their own ward. On the way, one of the women dies from her severe beating. The doctor's wife finds water and cleans the corpse, cleans the other women, then cleans herself. Then she sends her husband to the thugs to fetch the food that they have earned by serving as objects of torture. Chapter 12. A few days pass, and the thugs send out a small party to the next ward in the rotation, demanding women. They stop by the doctor's wife's ward on the way and hurl insults and denigrating remarks about the women's sexual performance. When they learn that one of the women died from the prolonged sexual assault, they seem amused and note that the remaining women will simply have to work harder on their next rotation. When the men recover the women from the next ward, they are pleased to discover there are 15 women. As they drive the women down the hall, the doctor's wife takes the scissors from the wall and silently accompanies the women. At the thugs' ward, the previous scene of rape and debauchery is quickly repeated. The doctor's wife enters the thug's ward and stands near the leader while he forces a woman to perform fellation. Just at his moment of climax, as he arches his head backward, the doctor's wife plunges the scissors into his neck, penetrating him through to the spine. A general melee breaks out, and the doctor's wife runs through the room, slashing and stabbing at the thugs and directing the battered women from the area. She manages to kill several of the men before the chronicler secures the handgun and begins firing at random down the hallway. Over the next few days, the thugs barricade themselves in their ward. The other inmates are alarmed because the guards make no further food deliveries. As they begin to starve, they begin to resent whoever killed the leader of the thugs. They think that life was better with the gang rapes and thefts because at least there was food. They seem to blame the leader's murderer for the lack of food. The man with the black eye patch reasons with them, however, and they are determined to take collective action. Then the power goes out and the lights, perpetually on to this point, go dark. In the morning, several people, including the doctor, the doctor's wife, the man with the black eye patch, and the girl with dark glasses, attempt an assault on the thug's ward to try and forcibly obtain the huge stockpile of food that the thugs have amassed. They are unable to destroy the barricade, however, and 2 of them are shot and killed. They retreat and collapse, and in utter despair, the doctor's wife publicly announces that she is not blind. None of the others are particularly surprised or concerned. That night, a woman retrieves her cigarette lighter and sneaks to the barricade that protects the thugs. It is made mostly of bedding, and she sets it on fire. She remains to make sure the fire is successful, and her own body is consumed by a conflagration. The fire spreads rapidly and burns up all of the thugs and their food. Then it spreads throughout the hospital and causes a panic. The patients stampede for the doors, and many are trampled to death, while others are burned to death. Most fear burning more than they fear being shot by the soldiers. The doctor's wife is amazed to discover, upon leaving the building, that the soldiers are no longer present. The inmates are, in fact, free to leave the asylum. Chapter 13. The surviving blind people flee the conflagration and witness the hospital burn, then collapse. They drop to the ground and, exhausted, sleep where they fall. In the morning, they wake up and set off in various bands to uncertain destinations. The doctor, the doctor's wife, the first blind man, the first blind man's wife, the girl with dark glasses, the man with the black eye, Patch, and the boy with the squint form a group of 7 and, led by the doctor's wife, start off into the city, intending to return to their various homes. They quickly discover that the city is in chaos. They learn that the entire city, indeed the entire nation, has succumbed to the blindness, and that the doctor's wife is perhaps the only person who can see in the entire land. The city is itself a huge asylum with violent bands roaming the streets, searching for food. Excrement and filth are everywhere. One man tells the women that all of the blind roam in bands and search for food. He tells her that one group tried to barricade themselves in a grocery and hoard all of the food, whereupon other people burned the building and killed them all. The doctor's wife finds a safe building and places her charges inside. She then roams the city in search of food. She locates a supermarket stripped of food, but is able to see a hidden stairwell. She descends into blackness, fortuitously finds matches, and discovers she is in a full stockroom. She eats, gathers food, again closes the doors, and returns to her friends on the way. A blind man tries to grab at her food and instead rips off her clothing. It begins to rain. The doctor's wife walks through the city with bare breasts glistening with rainwater. She locates her friends, all of whom are safe, and they all eat and then sleep. It continues to rain. Chapter 14. In the morning, the doctor's wife selects new clothing for all of the characters, and they travel further into the city as a group. The blind characters ask questions, and the doctor's wife answers them to the best of her ability. She describes the city as vacant and full of filth. The group proceeds to the home of the girl with dark glasses. Her parents are no longer in the building, but one gaunt old woman remains. She has survived by eating cabbages and the raw flesh of rabbits that she has harvested from a small garden plot. She tells the girl with dark glasses that her parents were taken away after they went blind. The doctor's wife shares some food with the gaunt old woman, and the group then spends the night in the girl with dark glasses' apartment. The doctor's wife feels responsible for the welfare of the other characters and requests that they stay together as a group. She convinces the others, who are initially strangely somewhat reluctant. They then proceed further through the city and talk about what the future may hold. One of them comments that the situation of foraging bands without governance is like the origins of humanity. The doctor's wife sees several dogs eating the corpse of a man and is sickened. Later, she obtusely wonders what happened to the banks. The man with the black eye patch goes into a prolonged monologue where he explains a rather thorough history of the collapse of the banking industry following the advent of the white sickness. The group finally arrives at the doctor's wife's neighborhood. She is disappointed to discover that the area, like the rest of the city, is filthy and unkempt. Chapter 15. The characters arrive at the apartment of the doctor and the doctor's wife. They take off their shoes before entering, and once inside the door, they strip naked. The doctor's wife puts all of the shoes and filthy clothing into plastic bags. She then dresses all of the characters in clothing taken from her own closet. The doctor's wife then delivers a lengthy monologue on morality. The characters then eat and drink bottled water, which they find to be a novel luxury, and then go to sleep throughout the apartment. In the early morning, the doctor's wife wakes up to discover a downpour. She puts various buckets on the porch to catch rain and then strips naked and bathes in the rain. She washes the shoes and clothing in the plastic bags, then awakens the other women who also strip down and wash each other in the rain. Later, the doctor's wife draws a bath for the man with the black eye, Patch. Later in the day, they go foraging for food. On their journey, they stop by the apartment of the first man. The first blind man remembers an earlier trip he had taken through the same streets with the thief and compares that trip to the current trip. At the apartment, they discover a blind writer occupies it. The writer uses a ballpoint pen to write and feels the text's impression with his fingers to allow himself to align the sentences across the pages. The doctor's wife examines the writer's texts, and they talk with him at some length about the nature and process of writing and about the theory of private property. Chapter 16. The doctor and the doctor's wife visit the doctor's old office. They find it completely ransacked, and the doctor realizes that the Ministry of Health has probably seized all of his patient records. He touches his old instruments and realizes they are now completely useless. The doctor and the doctor's wife discuss the nature of the white sickness. They then make their way back home. On the journey, they pass through a large public square where numerous speakers espouse particular and strange viewpoints. The doctor's wife notes that none of the speakers are commenting on the nature of organization, and the doctor muses that perhaps organization is discussed in another square. On the trip home, they pass numerous corpses. It becomes evident that most people are on the brink of starvation. They once again stop by the house of the girl with dark glasses, where they discover that the gaunt old woman is dead. She has died on the very steps of the building and holds the keys in her outstretched hand. They bury the gaunt old woman in the garden that supported her life for several months. Other building inhabitants come out onto balconies and sightlessly stare down at the burial party. The doctor's wife shouts to them that the gaunt old woman will rise again. The girl with dark glasses leaves a lock of her own hair hanging from the doorknob of her apartment as a sign to her parents should they ever return. The characters then return to the doctor's wife's apartment, where she reads stories to them. The various characters tell the doctor's wife that they would have all died without her assistance. In the ensuing discussion, the characters equate being blind to being dead. The man with the black eye, Patch, then awkwardly declares his love for the girl with dark glasses. Although she does not reciprocate his feelings of love, she does agree to live with him and be his companion. She then delivers a lengthy monologue of the nature of attraction. Chapter 17. The doctor's wife begins to worry and despair. She feels overwhelmed by her self-imposed responsibility and wonders how long she will be able to help her friends. One day, she leaves the apartment to go on another foraging trip. She plans to return to the supermarket basement where she first found food. Her husband, the doctor, accompanies her. On her trip, she finds the streets much worse. Conditions continue to deteriorate rapidly. She passes through a public square full of speakers and notes. They are discussing topics of organization. She arrives at the supermarket and finds it strangely vacant. She enters the supermarket and finds that it stinks of death and rotting flesh. She walks to the back where the hidden stairs are located and is horrified to discover that the large stairwell is full of rotting corpses. She immediately blames herself, surmising that after opening the doors and discovering food, she caused a mass rush for the storeroom where dozens, perhaps hundreds, have died. Overwhelmed with grief, the woman staggers out of the supermarket. Assisted by her husband, she walks a few blocks until she sees a church. The two characters enter the church to discover many people are resting there. They sit down on a bench, and the doctor's wife faints. When she comes to, she looks up and sees that Jesus on the crucifix has been blindfolded. As she looks around, she sees that all of the statues of saints have been blindfolded, and all of the paintings of saints have had a thick white smear painted over their eyes. All of the icons are blinded. She cries out and tells her husband what she has seen. The other people in the church are outraged and then alarmed. They quickly become frightened by the news, and nearly as a body they leap to their feet and stampede from the church, killing many. The doctor's wife sadly but opportunistically gathers up most of the abandoned food from the church and returns to her apartment, where she again reads to the other characters. That evening, the first man closes his eyes to go to sleep and notices that instead of milky whiteness, he sees only blackness. When he opens his eyes, he realizes that he can see. The blindness has passed. He is happy and nervous, and within minutes, he announces that he intends to take his wife and leave the group. They will return to their own home and force the writer to vacate their apartment. They plan to live on their own. Within a few more minutes, others, too, begin to regain their sight. Then they hear others calling out excitedly that they, too, can once again see. All over the city, sight begins to return.